Hey guys, what's up? threads13 here for deucescrack.com, coming to you today with a video that's answering a question. I put up a thread in case you guys haven't seen it. I thought I'd go ahead and show it in the video here. This is a thread where it just said, hey, throw me some questions if you guys have any. Just trying to kind of think of a way to, get some ideas for what stuff that you guys struggle with, and then we can kind of address that specifically just in a video. So you can just look through it here. There's a few questions. One I've already done a video on about hand reading. And today I'm going to talk about this one here about 4-betting. And, along that lines, that will mean facing 3-bets. And my goal wasn't necessarily to go through every single situation where we face a 3-bet under the sun, but kind of give you guys an idea of what sort of things that you will want to think about for starters when you're facing 3-bets. So let's talk about a situation where you're probably, the situation that you're going to be most interested in is probably when you're on the button and you're getting 3-bet. When you're in early position and you get 3-bet, you guys are probably playing close to pretty well just by following your instincts. Because for the most part, you have a lot of good hands when you're in early position. And if you don't fold, a whole bunch of your pretty good hands, then you're going to be doing all right for starters. So, we can talk about doing some fine-tuning stuff there. But when you're on the button, you don't have a lot of good hands. So let's talk about what your button range may look like for starters. This is just going to be easiest way to do it. We're going to have probably a lot of stuff, but maybe not all of these or something. Maybe some of these. Something along these lines. Your range might not look exactly like this, but you can see on the bottom here, this is about a 50% range. So I think your range should look something like this. Some of you guys might be able to open a little bit looser if you're playing versus guys who aren't 3-betting a lot. So let's take a look at what that range looks like, and let's see, when we get 3-bet, we might consider these sort of things, and I guess maybe these your kind of premium-ish hands. Maybe we can throw 10s in there too. So you can see on the right here, that is those hands, those premium-ish hands. So we have those 10%, I guess 11% of the time. So basically 90% of the time we don't have a hand like that. So the problem that we can start running into, of course, here is that we can tend to fold to a lot of 3-bets. So a lot of guys' typical response to this is, ooh, I'll 4-bet them if they start 3-betting me. Which isn't really that great. The problem with doing that is, if we even look at these premium-ish hands, that's a new technical term, is how many of these do you really want to 4-bet and get it in with? You don't want to with ace-queen. You probably don't want to with 10s. Probably don't want to with these either. And even jacks, you're not jumping up and down, calling your friends to tell them how much money you're about to make, So this is the number of hands. So if we kind of split it up this way, we said 90% of our hands were not a premium. That doesn't mean we don't have some good hands. But then even if we go further, we can see that, when we compare group 1 and group 2, which is, we took group 1 and made it sort of the upper tier premiums, and group 2 being sort of the second tier premiums. In this area, we compare it side by side. You can see like 40% of the time you have those sort of ones that aren't really even that much of a stack off anyways. So the problem that we get into when you're playing no limit is one of this is, you open to say 2.5 maybe you open to 2x, whatever. Guy 3 bets to say 8 to 10, somewhere in that range. So the pot is equal to somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12. Okay? And there's nearly 100 in your stack. So the problem that we run into here is there's a lot in our stack and not really that much in the pot, comparatively speaking. So this is just the setup of the game. This is the game that you're playing, is that there's just not going to be that many hands that you are going to want to get it in with. When you're going to put 100 BB in when there's only 10 BB in there, it better, because the 100 BB, when it gets in, you're actually going to win, sometimes. Otherwise, why are we committing all this money? The money in our stack being so much more than the money's in the pot. So what ends up happening, a lot of guys, and you can see this happen very quickly. And let's take these hands out to make it a little easier to see. So let's say that these are the hands that we're willing to stack off with when we 4-bet. The problem is we've got a whole slew of hands. I mean, all of these hands that you could think about 4-betting with, to try to stop a guy from 3-betting you. And I mean, these hands, and I mean, really any of these you might think about doing it with. I mean, we should tend to do it with something respectable more often than not. But I mean, I've seen people 4-bet, the old Jack 6 suited, and stuff like that. So let's just take these and let's just assume that you aren't going to ever do it with any sort of hand that's kind of bad to 4-bet with. And what we can do in Combinator is we can go here to this output options in the top right, go down to set group weights for group 2, which is group 2 is the green one that I've put all these sort of potential 4-bet fold hands in. And let's say that we do that 0.2 for 20% of the time. So you can read through this. The weighting should be a decimal, acts as a multiplier. So 0.5 is equal to 50%, so 0.2 is equal to 20%. So it puts that in. So you can see if we take these hands and we only do it 20% of the time for these hands, very quickly, you can see that when you're 4-betting, you're usually folding to a 5-bet, which can kind of be a problem in that people will be getting a lot of folds. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Will be getting a lot of folds when they 5-bet you. Now, that's not to say that people are really taking advantage of it, but it is to say that there's a potential leak in your game. And the way I like to think about poker is I don't like to throw leaks in my game. And I don't like to teach having leaks in your game unless it's something that you're consciously doing. So, I mean, what could be a leak is you exploiting someone. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just the connotation's a little bit different there. So, I mean, if you call one thing a leak, then that's if somebody's beating up on you. But if you're exploiting them, then it's all fine. But it could be the exact same play. So I don't like planning my game for playing poker that way. I don't think that's a very good starting point. And if we have this, have a good, solid, fundamental starting point, we can always switch it to exploit people when we find what we want to do to exploit them. So what this is going to lead to is the sort of hands that we want to 4-bet. We want to be careful about these hands and really not do them very often. I mean, we're going to just not do it with these at all. And probably not do it with these very often. As you do that, then you can start upping this percentage here. And we might as well do it with like an ace-6 offsuit instead of a 10-8 offsuit, because we'll get better, we'll have better blockers, so we'll get our opponent to fold a little bit more often to our 4-bet, which is the kind of purpose when you're 4-betting one of these sort of hands. So let's go ahead, go to output options, group 2. Let's say we change this to 50%. You can see now we're getting similar percentage of our range. I managed to get that out of my tongue, out of my mouth. All right, whatever. Even though now we have a better range that we're 4-betting, and we can continue to improve upon this. Maybe take a few of these hands, a few of those hands. And now we can jump this up to where our group weights, maybe it's 75%. So now here's a part where we have a little bit of trouble because we don't know exactly how often we should fold to a 5-bet. It's not just a little simple, easy peasy math problem where you go, well, if he shoves ace queen suited, okay, he shoves ace queen suited and he has X amount of equity versus my hand range when I call, so he needs me to fold X percentage of the time or Y percentage of the time, so I will fold that amount. So we don't know how much we should fold to a 5-bet. So, and that's part of that's called, we don't have poker that solved yet. One, we don't know what his 5-bet size should be. So that makes it a little bit difficult. And I mean, maybe somebody knows the answer to this question, but I don't. Is we don't know what hand we should be making indifferent to shoving. So I used ace queen suited. I said, like, okay, we should make it so that if he's 5-bet shoving ace queen suited, so 5-bet shoving ace queen suited, should it be 0 EV of a shove? That's the problem that we start getting into when we try to solve the theory side of these things. We have multiple problems with this. Is one, should we be 5-bet shoving? Should that be the 5-bet size of choice? Now maybe it should, but maybe it shouldn't. So there's that. But is it ace queen suited? Is it jack jack? Is it queen queen? Is it 9-9? What hand is it? Maybe it's ace queen offsuit. Maybe he should be flatting ace queen offsuit. Like there's a lot of different things there's a lot of questions that we have here. Now what we could probably do is we could probably rule out certain numbers. Like we probably shouldn't be folding the 5-bets 70% of the time. That's probably not a good idea. So, and we probably shouldn't be only folding to him like 20% of the time. So that's probably a bad idea also. So now I think having a number somewhere around 50% is pretty reasonable. Maybe might be able to get away with having it a little bit higher than that, but probably somewhere around 50%. And like I said, that number's not really very well solved. So now what you can see here is now if we go with that and say this is going to be our strategy, is that, more often than not, when we get dealt one of these hands here and we get 3-bet, we'll go ahead and 4-bet it. Now, we can get into a whole nother discussion over whether these are the best 4-betting hands or not. Let's just go with this because, again, maybe we want to do it with some different hands. But, I mean, poker's a big game, and it's very hard to calculate the EV of which specific hand is going to be best. So, I mean, it might be possible that we should 4-bet King Jack instead of King 9. I'm here assuming that we call King Jack. So what you can see, though, is that this group stuff would be our total 4-bet percentage. So it would be, right around 12. And pretty often I see guys that I'm playing against have like 20. So that's a pretty good sign when you see things like that. Speaking of, things that we can do to exploit our opponents, that's a pretty good sign that you can exploit your opponent with 5-betting there. So that's the thing is people, like I said, you can see it before. Like if we go back to our example where, let's say that you're playing and with these group 2s, you do it, say, 40% of the time with all these sort of hands. Here, maybe some of these. You can see you get up to 20. It didn't take much work, and we still got a bunch of hands that we didn't really do it with. So pretty easy to get your 4-bet kind of beat. Even though 20 doesn't seem high, it's just, doing something, even, not most of the time that you get dealt one of these hands. That's the problem is you're opening on the button and you have so many of these hands compared to so few of the hands that are going to get it in. It's pretty easy to get your range kind of out of whack, and you can see now we're folding 64%. So we're starting to kind of get closer and closer to that 70%. That's probably not a good idea to be doing. So what this is going to lead to is that what we're going to want to do instead is be flatting some stuff here. Flat, 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 flat. We're going to flat lots of hands. Like I said, I kind of mentioned these. Queen Jack also might be close, and of course King Jack and Ace 10 are probably close. And flat bunches of these, and so on. Now, anything in a group, let's clean this up, sorry. Gotta fix my, let's get to group 2. Let's change that back to 75 and get rid of this randomness. So, there we go. And some more flatting hands. So there we go. So very quickly, you see, if you start flatting some stuff here and so on, now this would be your total, anything grouped would be, oops, let's fix this up. I made a mistake. There we go. Got it back to how we had it. So anything grouped is your continuing range, and therefore your ungroup would be how often you'd be folding to 4-bet, so or 3-bet rather. So you'd be folding, 55% of the time. 4-betting would be group 1 and group 2 combined, so about 10%. And then you're doing like 30% calling. So, and you can also look at these numbers here. When you don't fold, you're calling a vast majority of the time. 70-some%. And this goes back to this thing over here. Is when we are in situations where we are playing, these deep stacked, or not deep stacked, but it's not like we're non-short stacked, I guess we'll call it, not 20 and 30 BBs, is there's just not very many hands that we want to get it in with. But we do still have plenty of stacks, and we're in position, and we're closing the action. And closing the action is a big one. The more I play poker, the more I realize closing the action is like pretty sweet. Because you actually always see a flop, and that's pretty cool. Even when you're on the button and you're calling raises, you don't always see the flop, right? So somebody could 3-bet you. So now when you're always seeing the flop, you get a 100% try to hit a monster, so of course it's hard to flop a set if you don't see the flop, right? So, a lot of these hands here, and, I think we can call more than that, but a lot of these hands here, they're not that great a hand, but when you get a 100% chance to see the flop and you're getting a price to call, you can start calling. And this, does remove the issue of folding to too many 3-bets out of position, or folding to too many 3-bets, period. So when we're out of position, sure, it's a little bit harder for us to be calling. But having said that, there's not too many times where we're out of position and getting 3-bet when we have a weak range in the first place. That would typically just be in the small blind. Excuse me. So when we're blind versus blind, we can still actually call a lot. I think a lot of people are pretty tight there in that way. But yeah, I hope this kind of gives you guys an idea of what to be thinking about here. You see probably a bit more calling than what you guys are used to, and probably a little bit less 4-betting. I've kind of said 4-betting really isn't a fundamentally great strategy. And another thing I want to point out is also it's not usually a great exploitative strategy, because usually you've got one or two things that are probably the majority of situations is when you're playing small and micro stakes, is people don't 3-bet that often such that they fold to a ton of 4-bets. And when you're 4-betting with the intention of folding, you need them to fold a lot. It's just, so, you're going to need them fold most of the time. And when you start looking at ranges, you're going to need people to be 3-betting you in excess of a 12% range or so. So really, you'd like them kind of get up towards 15% before they start folding to a lot of 4-bets. So a lot of times if you're 4-betting with the intention of folding, you might just be making a minus EV play in the first place. You, in a way, have a leak there. Even you're kind of playing right into their strategy. So if they 3-bet you and their range is too strong, a really bad counter strategy is to 4-bet hoping that they fold, right? So and incidentally, that's what I see a lot of people do, just because they kind of overestimate how often people are 3-betting them. It's painful when you get 3-bet right. So our brain kind of blows it out of proportion a little bit. So therefore we end up 4-betting too much. So kind of keep a range on the 4-bet folding. And, be willing to call a little bit more in position. And, I think you'll have success with that. So I hope this helps clear this up, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. This has been threads13 for deucescrack.com.